and see what wildlife we can find, see what we can see, or see what we can hear, see if there's anything about. So do that. And here on Haps this week, the theme is nightlife, which I'm interpreting as going out at night and seeing living things, which is what we're going to do now. So we're going to have a wander around for a little while, probably not too long, try and point out what we can see, what we can hear. And as with all these things with actual wildlife in real places, I have no idea if we're going to see anything or what we're going to see or when we're going to see it. So it's all a bit of luck, but we will give it a go. And obviously we're working by torchlight, so you can see we're going to have some interesting viewing. You have to bear with the odd bit of dark screen, but hopefully we will find some things to look at. So I'm going to turn the camera around now. Have I turned the camera around? I have turned the camera around. And the first thing which we can see here, and we were looking at some of this earlier, is an ivy bush nicely out in flower. Fairly good condition, this ivy flower, so I'm hoping there'll be something on it. You never know. So I'll scan the flowers and see if we can see any insects coming to visit the flowers or anything on the leaves eating them or anything to look at. Well, there's a snail here. Let's have a look at this snail. And so this will be, I suspect, much more interested in munching the leaves than it is interested in the blossom. There's a small round snail there. I'm not going to attempt to identify most of the things I see beyond fairly broad levels because I'd need to take this, certainly take good photos of it, possibly take it home and examine it properly to say which species it is. But definitely snails, so they're enjoying things in the first bit of our Haps nightlife, if you want. And there was a lot of scent coming off this ivy blossom here. It certainly should be attracting lots of insects. It's not immediately succeeding in finding and showing me any though. There's a slug here. We seem to be doing gastropods at the moment. There's rather a nice slug here crawling on the leaves, and again probably much more interested in eating the leaves than it is in the flowers, which is what I'm really scanning for insects on. But I quite like slugs. They're rather interesting. Again, I'm not going to try and identify that to any detailed level beyond it's a slug of some description. You can see its antennae look out there front. There's a tiny little fly crawling on the leaf as well. Crawling up there. So there are definitely things out here. There's definitely stuff about. Let me see if I can find anything crawling on the vegetation. There's another snail up here. Bigger snail. Curled shell. I suspect that one will be identified, but it might well be a brown-lipped snail. But snails are not my area of expertise. See if we can see anything else crawling around up here. So, and another snail. Snails seem to be the theme of this broadcast at the moment. Makes me wish I knew a bit more about them, really. I'd have something interesting to tell you. But plenty of them. Plenty of blossom here. I'm slightly surprised I've not seen really any moths coming down to take nectar from these plants. That is something I would normally expect to see reasonable numbers of. There were some moths on the wing earlier tonight when I was just wandering around the site before I started this broadcast. And whether I'll be able to show you this, I'm not sure, but we'll have a go. Just give me a second. Which pocket did I put things in? Okay, this is going to be interestingly challenging. Let me try this. So what I found here flying around earlier on was a moth, fairly common one called a light brown apple moth. It's just flying around, possibly coming to take the nectar here. It's one of the commoner small moth species that we have here in Britain. Although in origin it's from the southern hemisphere, from Australia originally, but accidentally imported here with foodstuff and has successfully colonised Britain in large numbers and some other parts of Europe as well. So I did find that earlier, so I'd hang on to it just so I've got some moths to show people, or a moth to show people, in case there's nothing comes to visit this nectar on this ivy. Yeah. There's a different snail. Definitely getting back to the snails theme, I'm afraid. I'm not afraid, snails are interesting. There's a snail up on there again. Well, didn't see much else on this blossom. The other thing I'm doing this evening, as well as looking for wildlife, is listening for wildlife. And what I've got down here is, well, an iPad, but on the end of it is this red device. And this is essentially an ultrasonic microphone, and it's listening out for bats. And what that's doing is then recording the bats, having a go at automatically identifying them. It's a bit of a chilly evening, so I'm not sure how many bats there will be about. We'll give this a moment and see if it detects anything. Just turn this the right way up, actually, if I do this. At least the picture's the right way up now. Obviously, what this technology lets us do is to detect things that otherwise would be quite hard to see. I mean, you might see a bat flying by up the top there, but certainly hard to identify out in the field. But the different noises they make can be quite distinctive and allow you to work out which species you're looking at. At the moment, though, it's not successfully finding anything. Okay, we'll knock the bat detector off for now. Wander a bit further on, see if there's anything else that we see. And then, well, we'll see how it goes. Just going to have to pack stuff away, so it'll just be a second before I get back to showing you anything interesting, or at least potentially interesting, because I just need to put the equipment away and put my backpack on my back and wander on, and then we'll see if we find anything else to have a look at as we're going through the site. This site is called Grove Farm. It, as the name suggests, was a farm. No longer functions as a farm. It's a bit of green space in northwest London that's designated as a local nature reserve. But we'll wander on a bit further down the path here, and we'll see if there's anything else to show you. And then maybe when we get to the bottom, we'll have another go running the bat detector for a few minutes and see if I can pick up any bats. Tree trunk. Another slug. Oops, hang on. Let's go up that way and have a look at the slug. Now come down and have a look at the slug. There we go. There's a slug crawling down the tree. Again, not particularly good at identifying slugs. It's a nice speckledy slug, this. That might be one that somebody who knows slugs could identify from looking at it. Or it might not. And a couple of wood lice up here, or slaters, is that something it's called? They're isopoda crustaceans, so they're more closely related to things like shrimps and such like. And apparently you can't eat them and they taste a bit like shrimp, although I've never tried it. We'll go on a bit further. Some more ivy here. Again, reasonably in flower, this ivy. So we might have some chance of finding something. You never know. There's some more wood lice anyway. Oops, let's try and get this to focus in the right place. Are we looking at the right? There we go, crawling down the stem is a wood louse. There are several types of wood louse. If I get a good look at them, I can usually have a fair go at identifying at least the common ones, but we'll just say wood louse for today. And I'm sitting up here trying to snaffle any insects we find is a spider. It's being seen from the underside here. I suspect it is the garden cross spider, Ariana diademata. But I'd have to go on the other side to be sure of that, and that would be challenging to do here without breaking its web and scaring it off. Okay, I think they have quite a poor signal here, so I'll move on. Hopefully the signal quality will improve shortly. Okay, that seems to suggest the signal is getting a little bit better. As you can hear, there's a road right nearby, so we are essentially in a pretty human environment here. We're not really, we're not out in the wilds. We're just in the middle of suburban London, if you want. Another batch of ivy here. Again, reasonable conditions of flowers. All in reasonable quality. So there's a possibility that something will have been attracted to this to consume the nectar. There's also a possibility that nothing's been attracted to this to consume the nectar, of course. Ivy is, I think as I said earlier, sort of a really good nectar source late into the year as we come into autumn. And so as we go further into autumn, there is less and less for insects to derive their food from, so they do come to feed on this ivy more often. But of course, they're not doing it tonight because that would make for the broadcast being effective. So there's a moth. Okay, let's see if I can illuminate this in a way that will work. There we go. So I'm not sure. I think I need a person to help me with the lighting somehow. But that moth is one called the chestnut, Conistra vaccinae or vaccinae or something of that sort. It's a scientific name. One of the commoner moths, and one of the moths in the Noctuidae. This one's not actually feeding on the nectar, it's just sitting down here. Okay. Just sitting down here underneath the leaf. But it's probably been attracted to this plant by the smell of the nectar. And it would probably either have already fed up or be feeding up. So there are definitely insects about. We'll scan of a bit more of these ivy flowers, see if we can find anything else to have a look at. I think I need some way to link the light source to where the phone is pointing, to where the camera is pointing. But hopefully you're getting the sense. This is, basically what I do when I'm out in this sort of evening searching for things, is just to scan with a torch, see what I can make out. And obviously you're necessarily missing, I suspect, fairly large amounts of stuff that are just not catching the beam. There's a feather there with a woodlouse on it. We'll wander a bit further, a bit back towards the path, where there's a little bit more artificial light, which may allow me to have a hand slightly freer. Another snail. We seem to be doing well for the snails today. I think you might be able to see there. Oops, not if it does that, you're not. Let's try it again. Curled out by the bottom of the snail is a bit of snail poo. And don't say I don't show you the most exciting sights on these broadcasts. And another slug. Quite a large slug, this one. Let me illuminate it there. I illuminate that and hold my hand up. I can't easily do three things at once. Hold my hand up next to the slug. Might give you some idea of the scale of it. It's quite a large one. Quite a nice sort of yellow, rather dappled pattern to it. Always like slugs and snails, just don't know much about them. And then there's another patch of ivy. This one doesn't seem as well developed in its flowers. They don't. Perhaps actually some of them seem a bit over actually. Yeah, maybe somewhat less likely to have anything on it. And we'll wander a bit further down. As you can see, we'll come down here. We're coming down to a place with artificial lighting. We'll stop down there and briefly stick the bat detector on for a couple of minutes, just in case. Quite often you get bats flying along the edges of buildings or following paths or flying around lights which have attracted the insects that they like to eat. So we'll see if there are any bats flying about when we get down here. Just check a few more bits of the ivy before we do. No. Okay, let's briefly set the bat detector up for a couple of minutes. Oops. So turn the camera around so you're theoretically looking at me whilst I'm talking, although you probably can't see much of me because it's rather dark. And I'll just quickly get this bat detector set up again. And we will see if anything around here. Ground. Detector. Start it. And start recording. Okay. And then we'll just stand around for a couple of minutes. I'll try and walk somewhere where there's a bit of a better signal quality. And just see if we can detect any bats. Oh, Pablo. Just looking for listening for bats with a bat detector here. Not with any success so far, but we'll give it a go for a few minutes. Out here in the dark. We've been having a look for other wildlife as well. Insects, mainly finding slugs and snails rather than insects, but we found some moths as well. I'm still getting told I've got a signal quality slightly improving. Okay, we'll stop here for a couple of minutes where it says I've got a decent signal and see if any bats come to be detected. So that was a bat going through, and the system helpfully applies some artificial intelligence and tells you what species it thinks it is. It thinks this is a soprano pipistrelle, which I tend to agree with. That's its name, its scientific name. So we can detect bats, so nightlife. It also suggests the second most likely ID, which is not at all likely here in the United Kingdom. The artificial intelligence in this system is basically optimized for the whole of mainland Europe. So it suggests a lot of species I've got no chance of actually seeing. But there we go. So we are able to pick up some bats. This is, I am reliably told by Georgia, who's another broadcaster here on HAP's International Bat Month. So it's a good month to look for bats, wherever you are. And if you, well, certainly here in the United Kingdom, there are lots of groups run bat walks. So if you haven't got the equipment yourself, there will probably be someone in your area over the next month who is running walks in an evening where they go out with devices like this and find the bats for you. I suspect the same happens in lots of other parts of the world, but I can't say for sure. Oops. So this is oops, doesn't want to focus now, does it? Turn the sound up a bit and see if you can hear the bat next time it goes over. So hopefully you can hear the noise there, that sort of piping noise as the bat flies over. And what's going on there is that the device is translating the sound it makes, which is way beyond human hearing. And it's doing something called heterodyning it down. In effect, what that does is it makes the central frequency it's at go turn it to 0 hertz, no sound, and then the deviations from that it plays as if they were higher frequencies. So it turns it into something you can hear. It's not really in any sense what the bat is hearing or what is really going on, but it's a way of just listening in. And people who do this a lot more than me, can actually just by listening to the noise that these machines make tell you which bat is flying overhead. I still rely on having the recordings, having the ID suggested by the device, and then doing it myself at home, taking recordings home and processing them. And the identification. Anyway, that's all around to see what we could see. We've seen a few things. We've seen slugs and snails and moths and wood lice and spiders. We've heard bats and we've seen the patterns they make on this device. So I think that is as good a place as any to stop tonight's broadcast. over the next week, I'm going to be away in Cornwall in the southwest of the United Kingdom on a wildlife week with some friends. I will try to hop onto Haps occasionally, but mainly I'm with a group of friends who have no interest whatsoever in being broadcast to the whole world. So I don't think I'll get on as much as I necessarily could. But if I say anything interesting, or if I do any particularly nighttime themed nightlife stuff, I will hop on if I can and share them with people on here. But that being the case, I'm just going to briefly put things down and we will end the broadcast